Hiya! So in this video we're going to be looking at how to paper piece the half hexagon medal shape. I like to call it a medal shape because I think it looks really grand. So what you'll need is fabric scissors, if you're thread basting then a needle and some just random thread for basting. I tend to use not any sort of branded thread. Thread for sewing up, and I'm using the Gutermann fabric clips, a little pair of thread snippers, and of course your hexagon templates. And I'm going to use an acrylic template as well as the paper pieces to show you how to stitch it together. Okay, so we're going to start off by, I'm going to use my acrylic template to cut out my half hexagons. You can just cut it out without the acrylic template. If you're not doing any focus cutting, then you can just cut it. I'll show you both actually, it's probably easier. So let me find the edge where I've already started cutting into this. So I've got my fabric, and if I wanted to cut it out without the template, I'm just going to place it onto the fabric. It doesn't matter which way you put it because you're going to turn it over to baste anyway. And I like to do a larger seam allowance. It just gives me a bit of room when making it, and it's not a faff to do. And I'm just going to use my scissors and cut around, and I'm going to do around about 3/8 of an inch like that. So that's if you wanted to do it without the acrylic template, or if you want to do it with the acrylic template, then you're just going to place it onto your fabric again. And the good thing about the half hexagon is you can maximise how you cut it out from your fabric if you're not doing any focus cutting. And I've put the acrylic template on, and I'm just going to cut around the template as a guide. So you might need to move your fabric out the way a bit. Like that. So you want to repeat that so you've got 6 pieces of fabric cut out in the half hexagon shape. And then we're going to look at how to baste them. So the way I like to do it is I like to use fabric clips, binding clips, and I'm going to turn the fabric over so it's on the wrong side, and I'm going to place my paper template onto the back. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my clips to clip here, oops, take the scissors then, and to clip there. So you can see I've clipped it into shape rather than pinning it into shape. If I just show you why I prefer not to pin. Right, so if I did that, and then I'm just going to use a needle to pin it into place just to show you. So if it were pinned onto place, it can kind of move the shape of the template, and it also kind of has more wiggle room, which I don't really want, to be honest. Whereas when the clips are on, you're maintaining the shape of the template and maintaining the shape of the fabric, and there's much less wiggle room on here because these clips are holding it. And you can put more on, because I'm using 1-inch half hexagons, I'm just using 2 clips, but you can add more clips if you want. Then I'm going to get a sharp needle and a piece of basting threads. This isn't expensive thread, this tends to just be the cheapest thread that I can get my hands onto, and I've tied a couple of knots in at the end. See if I can get that into focus for you. Tied a couple of knots in at the end of the thread. And then what I'm going to do is, starting from the wrong side of the fabric, I'm starting on this longest edge here of the half hexagon. I'm going to fold the fabric down, and I'm going to go through from the back and take it all the way through. So I'm going through the fabric, through the paper template, and I'm coming out the other side. I'm then going to come up maybe 1/4 of an inch along the template and bring it all the way back up. And now is when you're going to use, I'm going to take this clip off because it's in the way, and I'm going to use my nail, and I'm just going to push my nail in as I fold that corner over. And then you've got your tail like this, and you take your needle back down through that. And what this is going to do is it's going to hold that fold into place. I don't know if that's in focus there. So you can just see it's going to hold that into place, so it shouldn't come out anymore. And again, we're going to keep working our way round, so I'm going anti-clockwise because that's the way I prefer to do it. But if you want to go, If you want to go clockwise, that's fine. The main thing I would say is just to make sure you go the same direction each time. So if you're going anti-clockwise, go anti-clockwise on all your shapes. And if you're going clockwise, go clockwise on all your shapes. So I've come back up 1/4 of an inch along again. And I'm going to move this clip, just make sure that I'm keeping it flat, but just going to move it along a little bit so it's not in the way. And as we did on this corner, I'm going to use my nail and bend it over and kind of just thumb press it into place, and then take my needle back down to hold that fold into place. And you're going to keep working your way around. So come up 1/4 of an inch along, bring it all the way through the fabric, the paper template, and again, and use your thumb again to fold that edge over. And I've taken that binding clip off. Take your needle down to hold it into place, back up 1/4 of an inch along, and then this is the last one. So this can be a little bit trickier here just because you've got most of it already folded, and again it kind of just helps if you've got a little bit of a nail to kind of just pull it into place. So what I'm going to do is just really use my nail to push that fabric in to make sure it's going right up to the edge, folding it over, and then take my needle back down through the corner again. Come up one last time, and then I'm going to tie a knot. So I'm just making a loop at the thread and putting my needle through the loop, and I do it twice, and then cut my thread, and that is your basted half hexagon. And you can see here how the tails, because we went anti-clockwise, you've got one tail pointing down and one tail pointing up, and that's exactly how you want it to be. And also you can see here how going down on the corners and coming up along the edges holds those corners into place. It means these tails aren't going to come undone because you've held them on. So I'm going to show you one more time just so you can see, and hopefully I'll do less talking about it this time, sorry. You'll see that I like to talk quite a lot. So I'm tying a knot twice at the end of my thread just to make sure it doesn't go through, and then I'm just going to put those clips onto place like we did the first time. So I'm putting one on this corner and one on this corner, and I'm going to start on this long edge, so exactly the way we did before. I'm going down the middle of the long edge, and it may be if you've got a bigger shape you need to do more ups and downs. The main thing I would always say is to make sure you go down on the corners and then come up along the edge, and then what you do in between is completely up to you. So I'm folding that corner over, taking that clip off, taking my needle down through there. You have to excuse all the cat scratches on my hands, by the way. So I'm coming back up, taking my thumb in there to bend that corner over. I'm just going to move that clip over slightly and take it back down through there. Come up halfway along the edge, take the last clip off, use my thumbnail, dig it in, bend that corner over, do the last one. So you come up halfway along the edge, use your thumbnail, dig that corner right in, take it down, come back up. You can see I just about had enough thread, and then make a loop, put your needle through it, and then pull it, and then do it once more. So make a loop, put your needle through it, and then pull it tight, and then cut your thread. And you want to do that 6 times, and then you're going to have your 6 half hexagons. Let me move these clips out the way. So your 6 half hexagons, because we made sure we always went in the same direction, and again that's completely up to you whether you want to go clockwise or anti-clockwise, but it means that these tails are going to nest on top of each other when we sew them together. So like that. Whereas if you altered your direction on your different shapes, it might be that this tail's going that way, but because that tail's going that way, they're going to kind of jam against each other and not in a positive way. and then once you've done your 6, we're going to sew them together like this. And just before I come on to that sewing together bit, I've just turned it out of shape a bit, I just wanted to talk about the middle of your block. So there are different options that you can do here. I'm going to show you how to do a half hexagon just because that's how I prefer it. But in the centre of your block, you could also fit 2 half hexagons in there. The other option is the 1-inch hexagon, which I'll be showing you, which will fit in like that. You can do 6 equilateral triangles, they'll fit in there. You could do, this is when I have to try and see how, if my head can get this bit round. You know, sometimes in your brain just isn't doing what you want it to do, so you could fit, so they're hexagon thirds and they'll fit in the centre. You can do kites, or the other option, especially because it's one we did in a previous sew along, if you wanted to go down that route, is you can do your 60-degree diamonds, and if you sew 3 of those together, you'll get the hexagon shape that kind of fits at the centre of your block. So because I'm using 1-inch half hexagons, I would use 1-inch hexagon thirds, a 1-inch hexagon, or 1-inch 60-degree diamonds. Obviously if you're going for 1.5-inch half hexagons, then you'd choose the 1.5-inch for the corresponding shapes. And I'm going to show you it just with the 1-inch hexagon just for ease. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I baste a hexagon just for ease, then it's all in one video so you don't have to go back to previous videos. So in exactly the same way that I've done before, I used a template to cut around the 1-inch hexagon, and I'm going to use my clips to hold it into place. You can add a third one on if you want. Just grab, obviously the larger the template, the more I tend to use, the more clips that I tend to use, and also the more clips you use, the less wiggle room there'll be. So in exactly the same way that we did before, use your thumb to fold it down. So go down, actually I didn't need to fold it yet, so I'm going to go down along the long edge, all the way through, fabric, paper, fabric, and then back up again. And then in the same way we used our thumb, you just bend it over, take your needle down on the corner. The good thing about hexagons in comparison to the diamonds is that there aren't going to be any tails, so you don't have to worry about nesting any seams or anything like that. So I'm doing exactly as we did before, that I'm just working my way around the template and coming up on the long edge and going down on the corner on the fold. And I'm going to work my way all the way around to where we started, and then I'll tie a knot in it again. So just keep, and I'm just taking the clips off as I get close to them. And it's okay to do that because normally by the time you get to one of the clips you've got enough stitches round on the other side that it's going to hold it into place. And I think I just prefer them for ease of doing it as well. It means I'm not going to jab myself with any pins. So do on the home stretch and come up along the long edge, and then just do that last corner. So I'm just going to lift that edge up a little bit so I can fold that inside, tuck it over, put the needle down in the corner. So again you can see how it's going down on all the corners, and then I've come up on the long edge, and then I'm just going to come up close to where I started, and in the same way that we did before, I make a loop, put the needle through the loop, do it once, and then repeat it again. So that is your basting done, and that's how I prefer to thread baste. If you want to glue baste, that's absolutely fine, and it's finding the way that works for you. So I'm going to move these paper templates out the way, and then we'll start sewing them together. So when throwing together, dearie me, right, when sewing together, I would choose a thread that matches the colour of the fabric you're sewing. So if this was blue and this was yellow, you could either go for a yellow thread because it matches one of the fabrics, or you could go for a blue thread because it matches one of the fabrics. If you don't have a matching one, then I tend to always go for a neutral colour. I guess the joy of using one that matches is that in theory you won't see any stitches. For the purpose of the video, I'm going to use the grey thread when sewing my shapes together, just because I want you to be able to see the stitches that I'm doing. So I'm going to cut a piece of thread. Generally they say not to go longer than kind of like up to your elbow. I'll be honest, I'm quite lazy. I don't like starting and stopping my thread, so I tend to cut it longer, but it is more likely to knot that way. And when you pull it off the reel, the end closest to the reel is the end where you cut it, and then the way you've just done the cut, that's the end you want to knot. You almost have to imagine that your hand's like an extension of a sewing machine, so that would be the way the thread kind of is easier to sew. And then I tend to sew kind of, before I sew, sorry, I tend to do 3 or 4 knots at the end of my thread, just because I'm quite, I was going to say I'm quite a tough sewer, but I don't mean like schoolyard tough. I mean I'm quite rough with the thread, and so I want to make sure that it's not going to pull through, which is the trouble I've had. And then I'm just going to thread my needle up, and I'm using a milliner's needle. This is just a John James size 11, so it's really, really thin, quite long and quite pointy, and I think that I prefer the length on it. I just find the shorter ones quite difficult to handle. So let me move these out of the way. So the way we're going to sew these together, so in the way that we looked at how kind of they butt up like this, you then fold them right sides together, and I'm going to put a clip here to hold it in place. Now I sew from left to right, and that's because for me it feels more natural. That's the direction that I write in, so it feels more comfortable to sew left to right. But if you want to sew right to left, then obviously you can put the clip that side and do it that way. So if you're doing it this way, and this is just the way that I join it, so I'm putting it on the inside of the join here, because these are the bits that are going to be closest to the hexagon. So I'm folding it in and putting the clip on that inside corner, and I'm starting on the outside. But also what I'm going to do here, see if I can get it into focus. So I'm going to start about 1/4 of an inch in here, and that's because on these corners they're what I call the weak spots. So when you open them back out and they're in your quilt, your knot might pull through. It might not, but just kind of for the extra security. So I'm starting 1/4 of an inch in, and I'm just taking my needle through the very 2 edges of the fabric. Now this is called a whip stitch. You can also do a flat back stitch, and I'll try and do another video showing that. I prefer to use the whip stitch. I just find it easier to do. And also I push the needle away from me. I know some people do it towards them, but I do it away. Right, so I'll show you. I'll stop wittering. So I've started 1/4 of an inch in, and you're going to pull your thread all the way through here. You can see that my knot, let's see if I can get it closer to camera for you to show. There we go. Right, so my knot is now stopping it from going any further. So I'm just going to use my thumb to hold that into place, and you can also see that I'm holding these 2 tails of the fabric out the way as well. So where you've just gone through, you want to take another stitch. This is your starting stitch, and just push it through the 2 very edges of the fibre. You're not going through the paper templates. That's now held that knot firmly into place. I'm just going to now go to the corner and start here, and what you're going to do is you're going to work all the way along here doing a whip stitch. And as you can see, I've already caught my thread on here. That's, if you cut it longer, your thread is also more likely to catch on the shapes, but that's fine. So I've now gone that 1/4 of an inch back to this starting point here, and I'm just going to take the needle through the 2 edges of the fabric and work my way towards the binding clip. And this is why it's called a whip stitch, because you are, says me as I catch that, because you're whipping the thread over the fabric. You're going through the 2 fibres, and then you're pulling it over, so it kind of whips over the top. And I tend to do my stitches around about 1/16 of an inch apart, and that sounds really precise, and it isn't that precise. It depends how tired I am that day, how grumpy I am, how precise I want to be. And you can sort of see kind of the whip effect that's going over the top. And like I said, I've done it in a grey so that you can see the stitches. So I'm just going to keep working my way up here. And this is the way that I prefer to join all my shapes. But like I said, it's about finding the right way for you. I guess the key thing to do would be to have a play with the different stitches, see which one you like best, and also whatever one you do, just make sure you don't go through the paper template. Just realised I've knocked it out of focus again, sorry. And then kind of when you get closer to the clip, you're going to take it off. And you're going to go all the way up to that corner, and then we're going to put a knot in the corner. And that's okay because we're not cutting the thread. So I'm quite happy to do a knot in the corner when I'm not cutting the thread. So I'll show you the knot that I do. If I were to cut the thread, actually I'll show you here. Right, so I've got to the corner, and now I'm going to take another, like we said, a starting stitch. This is going to be a finishing stitch. So I'm going to take another stitch through that corner, and I'm leaving this loop of loop of thread. I'm going to pass the needle through once, twice, and pull it tight, and you should be able to feel there's a knot there. Now if I wanted to finish my thread, I would then go back 1/4 of an inch like we did at the start, and then take my needle through there and do exactly the same thing, do the loop and put the needle through the loop twice. Because I'm not finishing my thread, I've sewn from here to my inside corner, and I've just done the knot here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up. I'm going to pass the needle through the back here. So I haven't gone through the paper template, I've just gone under that fold, and I'm going to pass it through. So we've sewn from A to B, and I've passed the needle through to C. It should be like this. And now we want to join the next shape. So we are gonna, let me get that back in focus. This will be the next one that we add on, like this. So I'm going to put that on, fold it right sides together, and then this time, because our thread is on the inside corner, I'm going to clip the outside corner. And again, because I'm sewing from left to right, if you were sewing right to left, then you would just do it that way. And so we have done the knot here, we've passed the thread through to here, and we're just going to do another starting stitch here. So I'm going to pass it through the two edges of the fabric, do one stitch, do a second stitch, and then with that loop of thread you pass your needle through that loop once, twice. So because we did a knot on this end and we've done a knot here, that means that should anything happen to your thread, it is already secured at those two key places. Now we're going to do exactly the same as before, and we're going to whip stitch all the way from the inside corner to the outside corner. And I'm going to keep going through the two edges of the fabric, making sure I'm not catching the paper template. And you'll kind of feel if you're going through the paper template, to be honest, because it gets quite tough on your fingers by that point. You can kind of see the stitches here, they're just forming kind of that almost like a rope-like effect on there. And I'm just going to take the clip off when I get closer to it and fold that tail out the way. And that's absolutely fine because it's just fabric, it's just paper. They're all fine to bend and to manipulate, and it's not going to damage it or ruin it in any way. So all the way up to where that clip was. And then in the same way that we did before, we're going to do that knot here. So I've done one stitch, I'm going to take a second stitch, have the loop thread, I pass it through the loop once, pass it through the loop twice, and then I'm going to take it back 1/4 of an inch. I'm not even going to stitch back to 1/4 of an inch, I'm just going to take the thread there as a whole stitch and go through once, twice, have the loop, pass it through the loop once, twice, pull, and then you should be able to feel the knot there. If you can't, then I would say do another one, and then just cut your thread. And then you have got your first 3 shapes that joined, and we're going to keep joining them in this way. So we stitched A to B, passed through to C, and sewed up to D. Stitched up to D, sewed up to D. And we're going to do it exactly the same way now. So we're going to go from the outside in, pass the thread through, and sew from the inside out, joining all these shapes. So I'm going to pop that in here. I don't know why the lighting's gone really bright on it. So I'm going to pop that in there. I'm going to fold it over, and I'm going to clip on the inside corner. Fold that tail out the way. And now I'm just going to start again 1/4 inch in from the edge. So started 1/4 inch in from the edge. I'm now going to go put the knot in my thread, go through and do the starting stitch, and then go back here. Taking care not to sew my finger into it as well. Okay, so once you've done that, so we did A to B, passed through to C, and stitched up to D, and then we repeated that same thing. So A to B, passed through to C, and up to D. And actually, even though I've used a contrasting thread, I know because I pull it quite tightly, I tend not to see the stitches. And these are just the little tips and tricks I find works for me to not show the stitches. If your stitches show, it really isn't the end of the world. It's what makes it handmade, and that's yours, and that's just part of your journey, and that's fine. So to join the last one, then we are gonna, in the same way that we did before, gonna place it on, and we're sewing from the outside in. So I'm going to clip the inside, and then because I sew left to right, I'm just spinning it round. And in the same way that we did before, start your thread 1/4 inch in, going through the 2 edges of the fibres, and making sure you're not going through the template and not catching the thread on your clip, which is what I tend to do. At least you're seeing it for real in the video. It's not all polished. And then I've gone and taken the thread 1/4 inch back to the outside edge here, and then we're sewing with the whip stitch, or the rape stitch. Is there a stitch called rape stitch? If not, I think we should start using it. Actually, there's something quite nice about rape stitch, isn't there? Like secure, wrapping round, keeping it safe. And I'll take the clip off, and I'm just going to keep doing this stitch right up to where that corner is, and then we'll do that same securing stitch that we did on all the other edges. Sorry, I realise I move my hands around quite a lot, so it probably takes it out of shot, doesn't it? Right, so I've got up to the edge. I'm going to pass the needle through once, do it a second time, and you have the loop here. Pass it through the loop of thread once, twice, pull it, and there should be a knot. So you have now formed the 6 half hexagons that are going to form the in the round for whatever shape you decide to do in the middle. If you're doing diamonds or triangles or half hexagons or some other kind of collaboration in the middle, then stitch those first before we get to this stage. And now all we have to do is stitch the middle bit of our block in. So in the same way that we pass the thread through, I'm going to pass it through the back again to this open inside edge. And the hexagon's going to fit in the middle, and I'm going to just work my way around. So hold on, I'm just going to put my needle there so I can show you what I'm going to do. So this is your shape. We've just stitched this last shape into place, and then we passed the thread through here to the open inside edge, and you want to leave this open for now, we're not joining it yet. Your hexagon's going to fit in like this. So lay it in the middle, make sure you've got it, if there was a direction that you've cut it, make sure you've got it the way you want it to be. And we're now going to fold them right sides together in the same way that we did for joining them. Fold them, and let me just take that needle out, and again, because I'm sewing left to right, I'm going to put my clip here because this is the corner. I'm holding it to make sure that these corners are going to match, and I'm going to find my needle and do that whip rope stitch all the way around to the other open edge. So in the same way that we did that, remember that securing stitch at the start? So I've gone through once, gone through twice, oops, drop my needle, and pass it through the loop here. You can see that I've done quite a few passing throughs here, and that does tend to be because I cut my thread longer than I should do. Well, I don't know, longer than I should do? Who says I should do? And I'm just going to whip stitch, rope stitch all the way around, taking the two edges of the fibres. Actually, my thread's about to run out, so I'm just going to tie a knot in it here. And that's fine, like if it runs out midway through, do that. So take a stitch, take a second stitch, and put your needle through that loop again. Put it tight, make sure there's a knot in there that you can feel, and then cut your thread. Right, so I've cut a new thread, put knots in it, and I'm just going to do that starting stitch again. So take the knot through really close to where I started, or where I finished the previous thread, and then I just carry on as if it were the same thread. And when you get close to the clip, you just take it off. And like I did on the other corners, I quite like putting one of those, I don't know, should we call it an anchor stitch? Just to anchor knot to hold it into place in the corner. So I get my thread caught up. Right, so once I get to the corner, I'm going to take one stitch, two stitch, pass it through that loop once, twice, and pull. And now I'm going to bend it to the next corner. So we're just working our way around anti-clockwise. And again, like I said, bending the templates is absolutely fine. So see, I've bent this one now. And that's going to be fine because once you've ironed it or pressed it, and also taking the paper templates out is not gonna be noticeable at all. So I'm just going to continue stitching towards the clip. Okay, and then when we get to the last edge, you're just going to fold that in exactly the same way as we've done before. Use your clip to hold it into place. And then this is when I feel like I'm playing thread chicken, because I've got that much thread left. I don't know if you can see it there. I'm determined to make sure I can get it to the end. It's the little things, right? So continuing doing this stitch, and then when we get to the other edge where the open edge is, that's when we close that gap. So once I get close to the clip, I take the clip off, I continue doing the whip rope stitch. I'm sure I'm coming up with lots of new words. That anchor stitch in the corner, the rope stitch to join it. Right, so getting up to the corner, I'm going to do that anchor stitch. So take it through once, twice, and pass the needle through the loop once, twice. So this centre bit is all stitched in, and now all you need to do is close this gap up. So we're going to fold that middle shape in half, and then clip the edge you're going to sew towards, and in the same way we did before, you might have to fold the tails out the way, and I just turned it round actually because I sew left to right. You might not need to, and you want to take another couple of anchor stitches here just right on that edge, because you really want to make sure that there isn't going to be a gap there. And then the same way that we did before, we're just going to do the whip rope stitch. Sure, I'm making life harder by coming up with all these new words. Right up to the end, and then you can do a little happy dance if you think you're going to win the thread war. Oh, I think I might do it. That genuinely makes me really happy. So I'm going all the way up, and I'll go all the way up to that open corner to close it. Can I still call it an open corner if I'm closing it? Oh, you know what I mean. So I'm going to go right up, and I'm going to do that anchor stitch again in the corner once I get there. So I've got there, I'm going to do the second stitch to hold it into place. So I'll just check it's still in focus on the camera. And I've got that loop of thread, so I pass it through once, twice. Make sure you feel the knot, and then take it back 1/4 inch again, just so that knot isn't the only knot that's securing your thread. So I've taken it back 1/4 inch, taken one stitch, taken the second stitch, passed it through once, twice. Stick your needle somewhere safe where you'll find it. If you're anything like me, that tends to be in my jumper. And then you have finished stitching together your first half hexagon medal. I quite like a medal shape, the name, because I think it gives it kind of the grandeur that it deserves. So have a go, let me know how you get on, and I can't wait to see what you make.